When Candace Gingrich met Bill Clinton in 1996, half-brother Newt was 2 years into a political war with the White House. At a fundraising event, the president worked his way down a line of guests. He got to the young human rights campaign staffer with the Republican House Speaker for a relative. He got a welcome surprise. "I'm sure people ask you lots of things about politics and whatnot," Gingrich remembers saying. "But I want to ask you about playing rugby. Famously or infamously, depending on your view of a notoriously violent sport, Clinton played rugby union at Oxford. He had this sort of far-away look in his eye," Gingrich says, "and he started telling me this story about probably having a concussion but the coach saying, 'You're the biggest guy out there, we need you.' It was fun. He got to step out of being the president for a minute and be a rugger again. It is a big week for rugby in the US, but A spokesman did not respond to a request for comment, and nor did a representative of George W. Bush, Clinton's brother from another mother, and fellow egg chaser. Bush's reticence may or may not have been related to the notoriety of a Snopes-certified picture of a somewhat suspect tackle he made while playing for Yale. History in Pictures, at Historian Pics, George W. Bush plays a little dirty rugby for Yale in 1966. pic.twitter.com/r1upx4ab February 5, 2014. But Gingrich, an activist, Friends guest star and longtime hooker for the Washington, D.C. Furies, was happy to attempt to explain why football's cousin has cast its counterintuitive appeal across the political divide. "You play rugby for yourself, obviously, because it's an amazing game and it feels great and it's just the best. But you also play for the other people on the field with you, and that carries on off the field too. Rugby is a fierce but fiercely social sport that can often help young people find their true selves." Gingrich has something in common with the USA forward and World Rugby Hall of Famer Phaedra Knight. They came to terms with their sexuality in part through playing the game. Like many Americans, they discovered rugby in college. Now, on campuses across the U.S., Gingrich seeks out women who play and encourages them to distill the spirit of the game into campaigns for progressive causes. Few need much prompting to do so. Among fans, tales of well-known people who found the game on campus and now prefer it to football are rife. Some rugby lovers, avid for the sport to rise and compete with the NFL, go so far as to claim the existence of a rugby Illuminati, holding the levers of power. But luridly, that might be a secret society of influential men and women who put tape on their ears, thud into each other with unpadded glee, and drink unusual concoctions from boots. Put less luridly, more famous Americans than you think have played and loved the game. There are politicians and celebrities, and there are captains of culture, business and industry. In Hollywood, wrestler-turned-action hero Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson played rugby in New Zealand and has said it was the toughest sport he ever took part in. Russell Crowe loves rugby so much he owns a professional team, the South Sydney Rabbitohs, although that, unlike all other cases mentioned here, is 13-man rugby league, a different proposition altogether. You play rugby for yourself, but you also play for the other people with you, and that carries on off the field. Candace Gingrich in Washington. Among Democrats, Pennsylvania rising star Connor Lamb played at Penn, while Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy was on the team at Williams College, in Massachusetts. Among Republicans, West Virginia Representative Alex X. Mooney chairs the Congressional Rugby Caucus. No kidding, while the billionaire industrialist Koch brothers, Charles and David, played at MIT. Rumors, as yet unsubstantiated, link them to philanthropic support of the American game today. Barack Obama wasn't a rugger, and it appears Donald Trump never played either. But Chris Liddell, Trump's deputy chief of staff, certainly did. In the words of his alma mater in Auckland, New Zealand, Mount Albert Grammar School, in 1975 he was vice-captain and best player in the first 15 rugby team. The champion Penn State women's rugby team posed with Donald Trump in the Rose Garden at the White House November 17, 2017. Photograph, trips to Motivilla, Getty Images. Among independents, the Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban stands out as a vocal champion of rugby, its values and its more exuberant traditions. "I love the sport," the billionaire Shark Tank star, Trump hater and hard-charging back row forward said in a phone call that woke The Guardian up halfway through a bus ride to Washington to interview three-star general, former National Security Advisor and rugby lover H.R. McMaster. "I have lifelong friends in my teammates. I played after college for the Pittsburgh Harlequins, the Dallas Harlequins and then the Dallas Reds. I played old boys up until I got my hips replaced a few years back. It's in my blood. I actually played one half after I got my first hip replacement and it was nerve-wracking, kinda, so I gave it up there. I was worried my hip would pop out." Cuban would have attended the CRC Sevens on Saturday, he said, had TV duties not intruded. Had he been at the Talon Energy Stadium, perhaps to give a pep talk to the Indiana team to which he donates, he might have advised the collegiate players to follow his example. The Indiana University rugby team in 1979, Mark Cuban third from left on the front row. Photograph, provided by Mark Cuban. "Rugby taught me not to take myself too seriously," said the businessman who volunteered to be Hillary Clinton's running mate and has flirted with a run for the White House himself. "It taught me that you can beat the hell out of each other and then drink together afterwards. It taught me that a good rugby song and a party makes you lifelong friends no matter what. It taught me the value of fitness. There's so many things. The beauty of rugby is that it's so irreverent. You learn to accept other people for who they are." Mark Cuban. "The beauty of rugby is that it's so irreverent that you learn not to take anyone else too seriously too. You learn to accept other people for who they are. We had doctors, lawyers, day laborers, jobless, homeless guys even, you know. There was always someone who slept on someone else's couch. They're still my best friends to this day. We all get together every couple of years. At one such get-together at a bar on Massachusetts Avenue, politicos and non-politicos happily talked scrums, lineouts, rucks and rolling malls." Mike Enright, chief of staff to Martin O'Malley when he was governor of Maryland, later confirmed that the 2016 Democratic presidential hopeful is a convert, following rugby through his son's adventures in the growing high school game. Paul Sheehy bought The Guardian a beer. He is a successful car dealer who is now a joint backer of BCMLR, a team that aims to join the new pro competition, Major League Rugby, by 2020 at the latest. He also played for the USA at the 1991 World Cup in England, coaches high school champions Gonzaga College and is as passionate about the game as can be. Edward Kennedy, far left of back row, in the Harvard rugby team in 1955. Photograph, JFK Library. Back in the 1980s, when he was on his way up in Washington and the world, he applied for a job with Ted Kennedy. The last lion of the greatest political dynasty was a rugby star for Harvard in the 50s. He still took an active interest. Chris Doherty interviewed me for my job with the senator. He said, as Doherty, then a Kennedy aide and now a business big shot, happily nodded along. Took place at touch rugby practice on the mall by the Lincoln Memorial. We talked briefly about the job and then he said, let's see how you play. He hired me when he saw I was a decent player. I found my resume in a puddle of mud.